The English recorder? Oh yeah, no, I actually I shared the.
Let me rephrase that. Can you move forward and fill up some of the empty seats towards the front of the classroom? Particularly on this side.
I have it pretty centered, actually. The camera's pretty centered.
Oh yeah.
This didn't turn out much better. But
It's actually worse.
it is worse. I can't see anybody up here. Yeah.
I mean, it's more people funnel in.
Well, yeah, let's like stack this. We've totally got to game this, right? We are game studies. Like, watch this. Everybody move back to their original seats, and it'll be like perfect. This is fine. I think I'm gonna go ahead and reach out to him here.
Maybe you should put that on like a little swivel so you just spin it non-stop.
Right.
No, there you go. James, are you charging your laptop?
No.
He's probably still setting up. You want to give them the 101?
Yeah. So our guest speaker today, assuming that we're able to connect, is Zach Barth of Zachtronics. I posted an announcement to this a little while ago, including like a video of some of the games that he's done, as well as his Wikipedia page. As I said before, if you ask a question, particularly a good question.
Oh, I thought 7:15.
Oh, okay, that's fine. If you ask him a good question, particularly one that gets him talking a lot and that he's interested in, you will get extra points. All right, and I will give you between 1 and 2 points. I think I've given him 2 points, but I will let you pretty much put it wherever you think that you need it, which means that these are like some good points here, right? Are we ready to go now? Can you see us?
Yeah, hold on, my audio's in the wrong place.
Okay, no rush. So we will have people filtering in a little bit here. Yeah, we actually have about twice as many people in the room as we did last time.
Awesome.
And a
Can you?
stable camera.
Okay, cool. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Can everybody hear? Yeah.
Awesome.
All right, so this is section 1 of Game Studies, which is Art and CS 108. This classroom is probably more heavily computer science, but we have a good mix of artists as well as like a few other majors, both in design, and I think we have a couple of psych students as well. So, do you mind starting off like we started off last time, Zach? Can you like give us an overview of the games that you make and what you do?
Yeah, let me get a better chair. I'm on a bouncy ball, so it's gonna be bouncing up and down the whole time if I don't switch. You guys are gonna get. The guy I work with, I used to use a bouncy ball chair in the office, and he would get seasick like trying to talk to me. Yeah. So, oh god. Okay. So I make video games at a studio called Zachtronics, which I started years ago. Mostly, has anybody played a Zachtronics game? I can actually see you guys now, so I can see you raise your hand. Okay, so no one has played Zachtronics games apparently.
Well, we got people in the back, so
Okay,
I saw hands.
2 people. So we make a type of puzzle game that is really not like other puzzle games, where they're about like engineering and open-ended like creative problem solving. One of our things that we're kind of famous for is that when we make puzzles, we don't test if they're solvable. We just throw them in the game, and because of this means that all of our puzzles can be solved like a million different ways, which means that some solutions can be better than others objectively, and players kind of compete to like not only solve the puzzles but to solve them better than their friends. And we've made 7 commercial games, and 6 of them use this formula that we came up with a while ago. And so I guess that's like the first lesson of Zachtronics, is that when you figure out something that works and that people are buying, it's really easy to keep making that same thing over and over again. And that's what we do, yeah. So we make games. We have 5 people. I don't know what else you guys want to know.
Do you want to start with questions? Yeah. So why?
Come up to the microphone, please.
Face.
You get to see.
This is the hot seat message, right?
Yeah. You can actually see you have 2 microphones set up.
So why puzzle games specifically?
Oh, okay, that's a good question. So I didn't intend to make puzzle games. When I was in college, I started making games. I guess, okay, so one other thing I should get across is that when I started making games, I was making games as someone who liked games, but making games for money as an indie was less of a thing. And so for me, I really wasn't interested in even making like games like the ones I played or that I had played. I wanted to make games that were just about stuff that was interesting to me. And so I was in college, I was learning about computer engineering. I started making games about computer engineering. And like weird game, like one of the first games that I made that was like an original thing was it was like a game about reverse engineering, and you'd like go to like electronic devices and like read and write their registers and change the values in them. And like this was just something that interested me, and I expressed myself using games, which was a medium that I was familiar with, and like as somebody who liked games. And so when I started making these engineering games, I guess it's just sort of they naturally turned into something that was like a puzzle game. Because in engineering, you're given a problem and you have to come up with a solution to it. And that's like on the surface similar to a puzzle game. Even though like now I would say that like actually of the things we call puzzle games, there are a bunch of different types of games. But so yeah, so I wanted to make games about solving problems and building things, and it just ended up being a puzzle game. I suspect that like The Incredible Machine, if you're familiar with that, is sort of similar, is that they were like, oh, what if we made a game where you could build like Rube Goldberg machines? And they're like, okay, cool, we built this, what's the point? We need to make it like a game. There has to be something like, there's sort of the question of like, what is a game, right? It's maybe one definition is it's something you can win or lose. And in order to be able to win, I think like the puzzle framework works well there. So I don't even say, I'm not even really like a big puzzle enthusiast. I kind of like Japanese logic puzzles, but that's just like an incidental thing. Like our games have nothing to do with that, right? it just ended up being something that's similar to a puzzle game. Arguably, like, I'm confident enough in our games being just their own weird thing now that it's like, they might not even be puzzle games. We don't really use the term puzzle game for describing our games anymore. Sometimes we do. I don't know. Genre names are weird. I was talking about this in the last class, that like some genres are really broad and some genres are really specific. Like fighting games are really specific, but the genre puzzle includes stuff like Bejeweled, which is arguably nothing like a puzzle. It involves crossword puzzles and other logic puzzles that by definition have a single solution and you can use logical deduction to get there. Stuff like Limbo, which is like kind of has a solution, but is like a, I don't know, like it's a puzzle game and that you have to kind of think and sequence things a little bit. And then our games, which have like a million different solutions, right? So some genres are so broad that they're useless, and I think puzzle is one of them.
Okay. And I had another question too. So I met you at GDC and you were talking about why you chose or why you decided to keep making puzzle games, which is, to pay the bills essentially. But do you have any games that like in the back of your mind that you kind of like an idea for one that you wanted to make, or you just like, I don't have the time right now, or like something that you just want to make in the future?
Oh, we've no. So I pretty much make what I want to make. I've if you get into the I think if you get to the place where I am, or at least I've found myself in sort of this like feedback loop where I make what I want, but I want what I'm able to make. Right? Like at some point you get you get trapped like in your own logic that like I actually have a hard time even thinking of games that I like can't make, right? Like because there are lots of things I could say, oh, I want to make this, but I don't really have the ability to. But I'm actually at the point now where I don't even want to make those games anymore. I've sort of like brainwashed myself into what I'm capable of doing. And it's limiting, and it's going to be the reason that when we go out of business and I cease to be a game designer, that'll probably be the reason why, right? It's just that you guys are young, right? Like I am not as young as I was before, and I used to have a lot of ideas and a lot of things going in a lot of different directions, and a lot of them were like not useful. Now it's the opposite, where I have fewer ideas, but they're all like things I can really do, and a lot of them hopefully I can sell. And they're things that I'm genuinely interested in, right? It's not that I'm like totally out of ideas. It's just that like when you find out stuff that works, sometimes it's really nice to be able to not have to do everything from like scratch every time, right? Like most game designers are unoriginal and they take like, oh, I loved Castlevania as a kid, I'm going to make a Castlevania. No offense to anybody who's making like a Castlevania-like game, but like it's everybody. A lot of people who make games either make something really small or they sort of by default import like most of the design decisions from an existing genre. I've like kind of created a set of those things. I've created my own genre, and now that I have my own genre, I'm going to keep making games in that genre because it does what I want, right? So it's maybe not like a super cynical thing where I'm out of ideas. But that said, like the next two games that we're working on are not puzzle games, right? Like we're trying to push ourselves to explore some of these things that, like we've wanted to make that are a little bit different than what we've done, right? And they're probably going to flop, and then we'll go back to making puzzle games. We'll see.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So there's a quick question from chat. Is there any chance that Space Cam will return to the App Store?
No. Fuck the App Store. God. Seriously, there's lots of platforms you can make games on. Some of them are very good if you're a developer. Some of them are not good if you're a developer. iOS and Android, as far as I can tell, like they make policies such that it makes me believe that they would rather have games be gone forever than have like stuff that's old and not quite like up to date, like lingering around, right? Like we've actually had a really staggeringly hard time keeping our games on these mobile platforms without having to like go back and like completely fix them and release a new version. Spacecam, we came out with Spacecam in 2011. It still runs fine on Windows, even though we designed it for Windows XP. It still works on Windows 10. We have done nothing to make that happen, right? Like mobile platforms, like they will break your games, and then when they don't run, they will just axe them from the App Store, and then no one will ever be able to play them again. Which I think is like a weird, like now it's just like a rant, I guess, but like some of these platforms, they don't care about like the archive, like the like archival of old content. It's just whatever's hot and fresh and making them money is the only thing they care about. The PCs, I would honestly, we're at the point where we pretty much just make PC games because we can do anything we want. We don't need anybody's permission to make it, and the stuff like it just kind of lasts forever, which is really cool. I don't know. That was a rant. Sorry. But yeah, in short, no, it's never coming back to iOS unless like somebody. emails me and says, "Hey, I want to fix it. I will do all the work. You don't have to pay me." Maybe then I would consider it. We actually did a SpaceChem update that was we'd stopped updating it years ago, but some fans, like some of our fans, were going and like hacking the game to add new features in that they wanted. And it's like, okay, I should probably work with these people because they're doing like way more work than it would be for them to even work with me directly just to update this old game. And so we brought them in, gave them source code access, had them sign a contract. They helped us build a new update of SpaceChem that we would have never made otherwise. So there's your answer. Has anybody in here even played SpaceChem? Because that was just a bunch of gobbly nothingness to anybody who's never played SpaceChem.
So you previously worked at Microsoft and I think Valve at one point, right?
I did, yeah. 10 months.
Okay. What made you decide to go indie?
Oh, so I've always been indie. I started making games before people talked about indie games in college. I was giving them away, which is crazy, right? I made a bunch of games that were really bad, and I just gave them all away for free on my website. And this included, I went to work at Microsoft. I didn't work in games. I didn't think I needed to work in games to be happy. I just made games on the side. I worked on Office when I was at Microsoft for 3.5 years. I worked on games on my free time, and I made Infiniminer, which inspired Minecraft. And when I saw that Minecraft was making tons and tons of money, I was like, I could probably sell one of my games by now. So I don't know if you guys know the history, but Minecraft is a game that you've probably heard of, fairly popular. The block mechanic in it is borrowed from a game that I made called Infiniminer, which was free and did not make $2 billion. I don't have a chip on my shoulder at all, clearly. So yeah, so I was thinking, I could probably make a game and sell it. And so while I was at Microsoft, I spent a year with some of my friends and some people I met on the internet making a game called SpaceChem that we planned to sell. This was like a really pumped up, upgraded version of like my Flash games that I had made and given away for free. And I was still at Microsoft when it came out. I had actually switched to a games team right around when it was coming out. And then SpaceChem came out, and it started doing really well. And I was like, okay, like I'd originally said that like if SpaceChem made $100,000, I would quit my job at Microsoft. But then it's like, no, wait, there's 7 people working on this game. There's no way that can pay the bills for more than like a couple months. And so I was like, if we make more than $300,000, I will quit my job. And then we did. And like at one point, like I was talking to like there was like a senior game designer on the games team I worked on at Microsoft, and they were like they had like SpaceChem installed. They had the SpaceChem demo installed on their computer. And I was like standing over his shoulder and was like, "Oh, SpaceChem, huh? Is that any fun?" He's just like, "Oh yeah, I haven't really gotten to play it with yet." And like he had no idea that I had made it. And eventually I made it clear at Microsoft that I wanted to be a game designer, and then they hooked me up with a mentor, and he said like, "Oh hey, if you want to be a game designer at Microsoft, the best thing you should do is quit and go get a job at some other game studio, like get like the shittiest game design job you can find and work that, and then come back to Microsoft in a couple of years." I'm like, you know what? I'll do half of that. I will quit Microsoft, but I'm just going to go make my own games. And so I did, and that was the best advice I got from anyone at Microsoft was to quit. So I just started. I guess that was when I went indie, right? Is that when I was like, okay, this is my business now. This is my job. Is that I just go into this tiny little 100-square-foot office that I rent with my friend who worked on the game with me, and we make games. And it just kind of scaled up over there. We got more people. We laid off people. We got more people. We just kind of did that. At one point, I went and worked at Valve for 10 months because VR had come out, and I was out of ideas, and I was burnt out, and working on VR seemed really cool. I worked on VR for 10 months. I didn't like working at Valve. I wanted to make indie games, it turns out. There's something really appealing about being able to make just like whatever you want, but no one's looking over your shoulder. No one's trying to make sure that it's like a really high quality game. Like when I'm on my own, I can make fairly crappy games that at least excite me. So I went back to being indie. And that's what we do now. Although actually, when I left Valve, it was because we found a company that bought Zachtronics. So I actually work for somebody else now. So I'm not really indie, maybe anymore. I don't know. It doesn't matter that much, right? Like if you're doing the thing you want to be doing, like the title really doesn't matter, or like what the situation is. We have, I have what I want, so that's good enough for me.
Can you talk a little bit about like running your own studio or running Zachtronics and the things that motivated you to sell it and the way that things have changed since you sold it?
Yeah, so we shut down Zachtronics, and so timeline. So SpaceChem comes out in 2011. I quit Microsoft that year and start running Zachtronics. In 2015, 2011 through 2015, run Zachtronics. We make Space Chem, which did well-ish. I did pretty well. Ironclad Tactics, which we thought was going to do great, and actually did really poorly, so we had to lay off half the team. Not knowing what to do, we went back and made basically like a sequel to Space Chem, which was Infinifactory, which was a huge hit. And then we made Skyus 100, which was a programming game, which was also a huge hit. At which point I realized, okay, so I've made 4 games, and the 3 of them that have done well are all programming puzzle games, basically. And that was the point at which we figured out, okay, this is a genre, we're going to stick to this. So in 2015, after those games, that was about when so funny thing is, I'm talking about making that genre. We were focused really hard on trying to not make a puzzle game. I wanted to make like an open world sandbox game like Factorio, not like Factorio because that was not yet, like Terraria, but with like guns or something. And we spent a while working on it. And I'm just like, Christ, I have no ideas. Like we wanted to make a game that was going to be successful. And in the process, sort of like lost all of our souls, and I just got burnt out. And I'm just like, I don't even want to make this game. I don't want to do this. I don't have any ideas. And so that was when I worked at Valve. So we shut down the studio in 2015, and we didn't sell it then. We just sort of liquidated all the assets. When you run a studio and you're funding your own projects, you kind of have to have like a project's worth of money in the bank or sort of coming in, because like when you're making a game, you're going to spend a bunch of money and you're not going to make anything. Right? You're going to spend like a year or 2 or 3 or 4, hopefully not 4 or more, but you're going to spend time making the game, and you're just going to be burning money. And the goal is that when the game comes out, you'll get all that money back and more. For a lot of people, that doesn't happen, right? This is why publishers exist, they can fund a bunch of projects, and when one of them, like when only one of them actually like pans out but is hugely successful, it pays for all the other ones that were less successful. But when you're running your own thing, you have to have like a game's worth of money in the bank, and we kept taking all of our profits and just throwing it into the bank and then spending it on our next project. And so in 2015, when we shut down the studio, we were finally able to cash out that game's worth of money that we'd been sitting on, and that was like that was our only exit strategy, really. And so we continued to make a little bit of money like over the years, like after that, So we cashed out, and then I went to Valve, and that was when I left, and then found somebody to buy Zachtronics, and that was basically we transferred all of like the games to them in exchange for jobs. Was like more or less the deal, and like that's how that worked. So what was your question specifically about how this intersects with like market trends?
Well, more about like what are the things that that being an employee like sort of freed you to do? It's like as opposed to like running the studio yourself.
Things I still do. I still make the decisions about what our products are, and like what we're making. I still run like all the production aspects of the studio. I still write a bunch of code and do a bunch of game design. Things I don't have to do, taxes, because somebody else does them. I don't have to do payroll. It's mostly like paperwork stuff like that. The company that we're part of has more stuff going on than just us, and so in some ways that gives us more like inertia from like a financial standpoint. They pay us they pay the payroll, and it just happens. That's kind of magical and fun. They get all the money, of course, but yeah. So I like in some ways I still do, I would say like 90% of what my job used to be when I ran Zachtronics, but like the component that's missing is that I don't have to worry about like the viability of the business in quite the same way, right? Like our games still need to make money. It's just as important that they make money as it used to be, but like there's something that's like not on the line that used to be. I don't have to worry about losing my house if things don't go well, which is a nice thing to not have to worry about. Stuff like that. And honestly, like being free from that kind of fear really unlocks your ability to be creative. That was definitely, I think, one of the things that led to getting burnt out before, is that it's just like, oh god, if we make one game and it's bad, that's the end of Zachtronics, right? The only reason we survived Ironclad Tactics doing poorly is that we did contract work making educational games. We made a couple educational games for a company that paid us like pretty well to do that, and that's what kept us afloat. And we didn't want to do that again. Like we wanted to make our games, and so it's pretty much like, okay, if we make one wrong move, that's the end of Zachtronics, and that's super stressful. And that's what drives me to think that, oh, we need to make some sort of open world sandbox Terraria-like game, because that's what people really want, not engineering puzzle games. Versus now, where I feel like I really have like a just absolute peace of mind to pursue what I think we need to make, rather than like what I'm afraid we need to make. The funny thing about, you can keep coming up. The funny thing about all of this is that all this is all irrelevant to you guys. You guys are in a totally different stage of the life cycle of becoming a developer.
Hi. Hello. I don't really know how to word the question, but in like terms of visual direction for your games, how do you ask your artists how, or like what do you ask your artists for to get like your vision of the game?
Yeah. So I'm definitely like, I'm not an artist. I am a like programmer, designer. I think about everything like from pretty much just mechanics, occasionally feelings, but like not really in a way that's meaningful to anybody. Mostly mechanics. So I'll draw a bunch of pictures and be like, hey, this is what the game is. And then we'll start programming it with just these like black and white line art and just be like, this is what the game is mechanically. And then I'll try to like vaguely describe and like the feelings of what the game is or what it's supposed to look like, and maybe like show some reference pictures, and then I'll hand that off to our artists who'll start drawing stuff, and they'll start coming up with concepts for things. They'll be like, oh, I like that, more of that, less of that. Like they'll find like the thing our artists are really good at is finding like literally like thousands of reference pictures for directions that the game could be taken, and just be like, oh yeah, like these things. And like this is like not other games, but like real life reference, right? Like when we did Shenzhen.io, it was all about electronics and like Shenzhen, and like so they just started finding like tons of pictures of like the city and like electronics and circuit boards and like all this stuff and interfaces, and there's always like anime stuff in there of like interfaces from anime, and just start finding tons and tons and tons of reference materials, and then just kind of like trying to assemble them into something that is also like a functional, usable version of the thing that I mocked up in my sketches and the white box implementations. And we all work together really closely, right? Like we're all working in the same office. We eat lunch together for an hour every day and talk about just everything about stuff we like. Like things that we watch or stuff we read or, like games we play or like really just like any kind of reference material. We have a whole library of books in the office of things I've collected that are like all related to the kinds of projects that we're going to be making. And so like I sort of just like drag everybody with me like into this world that I'm creating in my head. We have, one of the things we've done that's been really fun is every time we start a new project, we have a kickoff party where everybody will come to my house and we'll spend the whole day like watching videos and like trying to eat like themed food and like really getting into like the world of the game. And that's been pretty successful for getting everybody like going in the same direction.
Thank you.
Yeah. Lately our games have been, you can keep going. Lately, our games have been really inspired by like real life stuff. So like even though Exapunks is pretty like kind of cyberpunk and like fictional, like it's all inspired by like 100% like real life hacking and like stories of hacking from the 90s and stuff. And so when you're making up something that's completely made up, probably have to have some art skills to kind of show people where you're going. But when you're trying to take like a bunch of things from real life and synthesize them together, it's really easy to just say like, hey, look, here's a video of weird computers from the 90s, and we're going to watch this for 10 minutes and talk about how it makes us feel, right? And like there's all this real stuff that we're able to draw on, which helps a lot because I am not good at expressing my ideas visually.
Alright, so I see that you guys release your games on a couple of different platforms like Steam, Humble, GOG. And lately, like Epic Games has been releasing, they've been pushing really hard to make their own store. And I know a lot of the consumers have been pushing back because of like the exclusivity and stuff. But I do know that they're pushing cheaper like cuts for your indie developers. I was just wondering like what your thoughts are about that, and if that's enough to push indie developers to like a new platform.
God, you might as well ask me who I voted for. That's a controversial question, I feel like, in this moment. Yeah, I mean, it's compelling, right? Like, so, like, the industry standard split, not necessarily the split of Steam, but, like, basically everybody takes 30%, right? And then now Epic's out here aggressively saying, oh, we'll only take 12%. And, I mean, I would love more money, obviously, right? Like, especially when, like, I don't know. I mean, like, for somebody, I don't know. Obviously, you do the math, right? That, like, that percentage that's the difference times the budget of a game is, like, can be, like, somebody's salary for a year. Or, like, I don't know, like a little bit of extra cushion. Like that's like a raise for people, right? And so like obviously everybody likes more money. I I don't know. There's a lot of stuff. There's some stuff I know that I don't know if it's public or whatever, or like how much of it is like NDA. But like, yeah, the offer they're making is pretty clear. Um, there's a lot of like, there's a lot of complicated politics going on with it, right? Like the Epic saying that like, oh, if only Steam would drop their cut to 12%, then like they wouldn't do exclusives. It's like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, what? That's like such a weird thing to say to Steam. I don't even know if that's true. Like, I don't know. Yeah, I don't really know how much I can say about that. I don't know. I'm not a fan of exclusives. I was not excited to hear that the thing that makes being a console developer asinine is coming to PC, right? Like, I don't think that anybody likes exclusive stuff. I don't even think developers like exclusive stuff. That's why they have to bribe developers to do that, right? And so this is kind of a case of just like the giants just kind of doing like they're fighting and we're just trying not to get squished by them, right? Like, I don't even give a shit about any of them, right? Like, I just want to make games, and I want to get them in the hands of the people who care about it, and it's just like, I don't want to get crushed by, like, by Epic or Steam or anybody in the process.
And then
right?
you mentioned that you used to work at Valve for, like, a short period of time. I was wondering if you could provide some insight on their, like, work culture, because it seems like for the last couple of years they've really been focusing more on the platform rather than making games. I mean, a lot of their like really popular games haven't seen sequels in like almost a decade now, probably even more for some of them. So I know you worked in VR, which is kind of like maybe different division than that kind of stuff, but if you know anything, it'd be pretty cool to hear about it.
Okay. If you mention a certain game name, this conversation ends immediately, obviously. But yeah. So I'm just kidding. So Valve is super interesting. It's not related to indie stuff at all, but it's super interesting to talk about. Are any of you well read? Has anybody read The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin? Ah, for fuck's sake. Well, you should read it. If you want to know what Valve is like, go read that book. It's like about space communists, and it was written in like the 70s or something. She's an amazing writer. So Valve is interesting because there are no divisions there. There's no hierarchy. It really is just chaos, right? Like they're not working on one thing or any. It's like people work on whatever they work on. I actually started on the Counter-Strike Go team, and after on the morning of my third day, before the rest of the team got in, I just rolled my desk downstairs to the VR team because I knew somebody down there. He's like, "Hey, we need some Unity programmers," and I'm just like, "Oh, thank God!" Like everything in Counter-Strike is written in C++, and it's like 20 years old, and I'm lousy at C++. And like the people who hired me there like wanted me to get better at C++ and like work on like proper Valve games, and I'm just like, "See you guys, I'm gonna go write C# in the basement," and so I did, and like. No one was gonna fire me, like it was too early. So I wheeled my desk down there and just started like cranking out a bunch of really high quality stuff, and that's Valve, right? And I think a lot of like it's if you work at Valve, it's not good to work on stuff that doesn't go anywhere, right? It's true at all companies, but it's especially true at Valve because like you pick what to work on. If you get like assigned onto a stupid project at Microsoft or something like that, right? We'll use Microsoft as an example, right? At Microsoft, you're going to get assigned onto a stupid project. There's an 80% chance that it's going to be a disaster and they're going to like can it, right? And it's not your fault. You just get assigned onto something else. You get reorged every 6 months at Microsoft as they shuffle everybody around. At Valve, you say, there's people working on that. I think it would be good for me to go work on that. And if you repeatedly pick stuff that's just like if I went to Valve and worked on like a Zachtronics style puzzle game, I could do that, but that would not be a good career move. Like that would not be the appropriate thing to do. If I went and worked on Steam and made Steam better, Steam makes so much money, right? Like no one's going to fire somebody who goes to works on Steam and does a good job. And so I think this is why you see a lot of people internally, like there's a lot of crazy stuff going on at Valve. Like I don't even know everything that was going on at Valve. There's a lot of stuff going on, right? Like VR came out of just like some like fucking weirdos in the basement who had been working on this thing for years. They had like a little room that they covered with QR codes, and they built like the hardware that like some may say like inspired like the Oculus to become like a commercial product and for the Vive to become a commercial product. Like they're just some dudes in a basement who didn't get fired, right? And like there's a lot of people working on a lot of stuff, but there's a lot of people that drift towards the stuff that is like the good thing. Like you want to, everybody wants to be on the project that's going to go places. Nobody wants to be on the sinking ship. And it's just a bunch of people making that decision for themselves. And excuse me. And you just get results from that, right? It's not planned. And I think that's the thing that's amazing about it, right? Like in some ways, like Valve really is like an independent, like they have that indie attitude just scaled up to like hundreds of employees making like ass loads of money, right? And it really is. It's cool. Like I didn't keep working there, but I wish I could have, right? Like I liked it, the reason I left was mostly because I wanted to make small games that no one gave a shit about, and Valve is sort of famous for making big games that everybody cares about, right? And so like I didn't, I really wanted to do my thing, to do like the thing that I'm all about apparently, but it's a really cool company. It's but it is. I don't know. Somebody should write a book about Valve or something. It's fascinating. Oh wait, they already did. It's called The Dispossessed. It was written in the 70s. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hope nobody from like Kotaku is listening to the stream. There's going to be some articles and get in trouble. I left on good terms. I joke to myself and the people I work with, I guess, that if Zachtronics goes out of business, I have to go back to Valve and be like, please give me my job back.
All right, so this is a little bit of an uncreative question, but I really, really genuinely appreciate different perspectives on it. What would you say to like beginning indie developers? Like, are there things that they really need to keep an eye out for? Are there things that they need to just like have a reality check on? Are there things that you would say to encourage them? So what are your words for like beginning indie developers?
I think they'd only be discouraging, right? I don't know. So there was, I'm gonna paraphrase what somebody else said. So the guy, Max Temkin or whatever, the guy who did Cards Against Humanity, he was one of the people on that. He has like a podcast, Due by Friday. They talk about like organizational stuff, and my wife listens to it a lot, and she played a clip for me where he was talking about sort of how like they succeeded because they had good timing, right? And this is the thing you hear a lot, which is that like a lot of people who are successful, they were just in the right place at the right time. And so that makes it sound like it's random, right? It's like, oh, like there's nothing you could do. If you're not in the right place at the right time, you're going to fail. But like, I don't think that's true. I think it's sort of along the lines of that, like, you have to, like, you are in a place and a time right now. What is the right thing to be doing in that place and time? And like, obviously, like what I've done and everything, everything that Zachtronics is and where I've gotten 100% luck. I was just a dumb idiot in the right place at the right time. Except that, like, there are a lot of other dumb idiots in that place and time who didn't do what I did, right? And so I think there's sort of the dance that you have to do is just like, you just have to, the actions you take have to have been retroactively like the right thing for where you were and for who you were at that time. And I don't think you can tell people how to do that, right? I think it's just that some people do it. Really, like, some of it is luck and some of it is just like killer instinct, right? Like, some people like see something and they're like, yeah, that is the thing I have to do. And some of those people are going to see something that's actually going to take them somewhere. Some of those people are going to see things that are not going to take them somewhere, right? And I think with games, right, like the most important question, like when you're making a game, is like, well, what game are we going to make, right? I see a lot of real indie developers who make a game that does poorly, and then they spend a bunch of time spinning their wheels trying to make it better. And like sometimes that works, sometimes you just make a shitty game, right? And like it's hard to fix it after the fact when you've made so many decisions during the process of developing a game. What are the odds that you can make a couple more at the end and radically alter the effects of those decisions, right? Like, the best piece of advice I've ever been given, ignoring that guy from Microsoft to leave Microsoft, was the guy who ran, do you guys know who Fitcell is, a now defunct game studio? They made Scribblenauts. You guys have heard of Scribblenauts and a bunch of stuff. So they did super well. They made Scribblenauts. They made a bunch of them. And so we had just come out with Ironclad Tactics, and it totally bombed. And Ironclad Tactics, for those of you who don't know, which is everybody, it is a card-based, like a real-time card-based tactics game about the Civil War, except there are like giant mechs in it, right? We made this game, did not do well. And I was talking to him about it like at an industry night, the guy who ran that company, and he was just like, "You're a smart guy. Why don't you just make a game that's successful?" I was like, "What? That's crazy. Like, what do you say? Like, that's what we were trying." And he's like, "Really? You made a game about the Civil War with robots? Like, and it's like, no one wants that. Like, make a game that people want, you know?" And I'm just like, "You're an asshole. Like, that's not helpful at all, right?" And honestly, Fifth Cell went into business, so like that tempers it a little bit too. But like that's the best advice I've ever been given, because it really is that simple. You just have to make a game that people want to buy, and like that is a prompt that is not helpful. It does not steer you in the right direction. But that is the problem you are trying to solve. Is that I think a lot of people get hung up in the details of like what does and doesn't work. If you get like 10 or more indie developers in the same room, 5 minutes in, they're going to be talking about early access on Steam and like the right way to do it. Doesn't matter who it is, doesn't matter. They're going to start asking each other about early access and what works and what doesn't, and how do you do early access and how do you not mess it up? Because they all know that early access can make you lots of money, but it can also break you. And it's like, well, how do you toe that line? How do you do it? It's like, no, you guys are a bunch of idiots. Like, you just have to make something that people want to buy, and then you sell it to them, and then you're good, right? Like, you can sell them a broken game on early access. If it's what people want, they will buy it from you, right? And then if somebody comes along and makes a version that's better or less broken that they want, they'll buy that one. Probably not instead. They'll probably buy both of them, right? And that, like, with any kind of media, it doesn't matter. Like, there are no rules. There are literally no rules. You can make anything you want. You just have to make something that people want to give you money in exchange for. Even that I don't understand, right? Like, our games are all, like, infinitely piratable. Like, people still spend money on media. It's crazy. You just have to make something that captures their imagination. Like, you can do anything. You don't have to be good at anything. You just have to capture their imagination.
Yeah,
That
thank
kind
you
of
so
answers
much
your
for
question.
coming and calling in today.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have one question, or actually I have several questions from chat. Let's go with, how much money does it cost, do you think, spit ballpark, to make an indie game?
Oh, God. I mean, Spacechem cost us, like, from a cash perspective, like a couple $1,000s. Like, we spent a bunch of time working on it, but nobody was getting paid. It was all profit sharing. I think I paid, like $3,000 for the art up front. And that was also with profit sharing in addition to that. Like, Jonathan Blow's The Witness costs much more than $3,000 to make. I think that cost them millions of dollars, right? It really depends on, and I think this goes back to the thing I was just ranting about, right? Which is that you don't have to spend a ton of money. You just have to make something that people want. Sometimes money helps with that. Sometimes it doesn't. Like, there have been plenty of games, like Minecraft probably didn't cost that much money to make. It took some time, but The Witness took a bunch of time too, right? Like, it's tough to say. I think one thing that has thrown a lot in the industry is that, like, to employ one person for 1 month costs like $12,000 to $15,000, right? But that's like paying them like an adult salary, like knowing that like a programmer could get a job being a programmer somewhere else where they'll actually pay you, right? So it used to be like $10,000 per person per month, but now it's like 12 or 15 depending on where you live. So that's a lot of money, right? Like, our games routinely cost, I would say, at least $500,000 each, and we make like one a year, if not faster, right? It really depends. Like, some people, some studios are very small and they pay themselves, but not a lot. Like, we used to spend a lot less on our salaries than we do now, because we had more people and we were slower and we didn't know what we were doing. It kind of varies. It's a hard question, but that's the only real answer, I think, is that, like, it depends on who you're hiring and how much you're paying them. If you don't pay people anything, it's very cheap to make a game. Yeah.
Okay. Another question here. Is there anyone in the industry who you'd like to work with who you haven't had the opportunity to work with before?
Well, not really. I don't know. There's people I like. One of the things I learned pretty early, like in college, is that, like, there's people I like. That doesn't mean I don't want to work with them, right? I have a hard time working with other people who are, like, strong-willed like myself, and I like those people as interesting people to know, but I don't think I could work with them. I actually, over the years, so we have a team of 5 right now, and it's sort of become like a really heavily curated team, where over the years, find a person, you find a person, and then you are afraid to let go of them because you don't want to work without them, right? And then like you do that for 10 years and you actually have like a really like stellar kick-ass team, right? And the people I'm working with right now are the people I want to work with, and I think that's like a super important thing, right? Like that you guys are gonna be in teams and you're gonna pick people to work with, and you're gonna maybe make a game, and then maybe you're gonna think that when you graduate that you're gonna like work together with them. Like some of the people you work with now are not going to be the people you want to work with. You're gonna pick a lot of people by because they're convenient, right? That doesn't mean they're the people you want to be with forever. And this is true of like everything in life, right? That, like a lot of people who make good founders of founding companies make terrible CEOs, right? Like Steve Jobs famously was, you know, like had the charisma to get that company off the ground and made a really, really lousy CEO once it was doing really well. And it actually took years for him to like mature. He got fired and then years later came back and was finally maybe mature enough to like actually be the CEO of Apple. And that's, I mean, it's unclear how much of this is just sort of storytelling about someone's life, but like, you know, not everybody is appropriate for every context. And yeah, I don't know. That's like the harsh advice that I would sometimes give students, but it depends on who's in their group or whatnot. I don't know. But really, like, it's, yeah, I don't know. There's another advice I got from somebody once, which is, do you guys know Clay, the game studio? They made like Don't Starve and stuff. And I don't even know how much of this is true, but we were at PAX. We were showing off Ironclad Tactics because we thought it was going to be a hit. We went there twice with it because we really thought it was going to be a hit. And we were across from like the Clay booth, which was like huge, and they were like, this is when they were like really taking off and they're really kicking ass. And I was talking to my friend who like also ran an indie studio. I was like, God, how did they do so well? Like they're making so much money. And he's like, oh, everybody on that team, if you took them and just like pulled them out of there and made them start their own game studio, they'd be able to run it and like make really great decisions. The idea that like everybody who was working there was like could run a game studio on their own. And I was like, wow, that's cool. Like that's not really my team right now. Like we're all a bunch of like amateurs. And I really think that like as we've gotten more to that point where it's like everybody on our team knows exactly what's going on and they all know different things, but like they could all kind of start a studio. Like I don't know if we're there yet. Technically, I don't think that's really the goal. I don't want people to leave and start their own studios. I want them to work with me. But like working, if you work with really like high quality people, that like has a profound effect on what you can create. Like just purely adding more people does not help, right? And that's true of software. That's true of a lot of stuff in general, is that you really want like a core team of like really solid people rather than a huge team of mediocre people. And then you can pay yourselves more because there are fewer of you and you're making like kick-ass stuff. So, but again, that's kind of like a far perspective thing for you guys. You guys have to slum it for a while.
Hello, Mr. Bart. I have a question. In your experience, how will you say is the best way to start a new project?
Ooh. I have my methods, but I don't think it's the best. It's just what works for me. I don't. Yeah, for a student, I would say the best way to start a project is to make your scope really small, and then just make something that you can finish like in like a month. Because that way you can make it, and you learn how to finish something, right? You learn how to start and finish something, and you do that over and over again. And it's going to be terrible, but the fact that you only spent a month working on it means you can throw it away and make another, like a better thing next. And you did like I made so many really bad games over the years, and eventually they slowly started getting better. But like if I had just tried to like jump in and make something big, I probably would have never finished it. Most people don't, right? Like a lot of people will try to make something that's really big and really they have an idea for like the game they're gonna make, right? You're not gonna make your game, your one game as your first game. Like I would just say like honestly, but don't like save it, because like by the time you're good enough to make that game, you're gonna want to make something else. So like take the thing you want to make your dream game right now, but make it in a month, and just be okay with the fact that it's gonna suck and not live up to your dreams.
Oh.
Something like that. Like you just gotta like anything. It's just like practice. It's not. I mean, I say practice. You can't really practice. You just have to do it, right? Like, you just have to spend a bunch of time actually making games, not just thinking about it. And you just do that over and over and over again, and eventually the suck goes away, and you just get better.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, well, thank you for talking with our class. I was just wondering, like, how did you work with, like, a work-life balance and not burn out too many times?
In the industry or as an indie?
As an indie and as a student when you're starting out.
Oh god, I just don't work that hard. I I don't know. I'm one of those people who does like I'm incapable of struggling. I just like I sort of go towards the path of least resistance. I do the stuff that's like the easiest, and I do a good enough job at it. That's okay. I never really. It might be like some kind of personality. Like I never studied in college, really. Like I don't know. I just don't. I don't know. Like, and it's not that I did great, right? I just didn't study, right? And so I just sort of followed that path. Like the stuff that I don't know. It is perhaps a viable strategy in life just to pursue the stuff that you're good at and just get better at that, right? It's possible that people are actually not that able to get better at stuff that they're bad at, and like I'm not going to say that that's definitely true, but it's easy, and you'll get a lot of good feedback from doing stuff that you're good at and just getting better at it. And like I don't know if like natural talent exists or anything like that, right? I think it's hard to talk about anything. Like the only reason you're talking to me and not somebody else is because I was successful, right? And I've never seen a good theory for why people are successful and other people aren't, right? And it's so I'm not going to say that it's like natural talent or whatever, but I think that like I don't know. For me, following the path of least resistance was is the strategy that I have used and benefited from. And so what that means in practice is that yeah, like on a daily basis, I don't push myself that hard because I just do the stuff that I'm good at, and I've adapted a lot of my processes so I don't have to do the stuff that I'm bad at. And I like marketing. I don't really have a good sense of marketing, so we just don't market our games. And you know what? I actually don't think it's really hurt us that much. And that's something that I think in the past I wanted to like I have this thing that I do when I get stuck on something, which is that I'll spend a lot of time obsessing over something and trying to think about it and just keep trying to think about it, thinking that like maybe if I think about it enough, I'll come to an answer about it. And what I believe now is the case is that it turns out a lot of our brains work automatically and not consciously. And if you don't have an answer to something right now, thinking about it more is probably not going to help. Sleeping on it might, but just like continuing to obsess over something is not going to help. And I used to obsess over about like a lot of the stuff in making games that I didn't have a good grasp on. How do I make a game that's more popular? Or how do I make a game that's about crafting? Or how do I make a game then like market it effectively? These are all things that I spent way too much time trying to think about. And eventually I just gave up and just said, fuck it, I'm just going to not think about that. And I've actually had way more success just not stressing out over that stuff. And I think a lot of times when people like kind of like get burnt out and like crunch on stuff like that is where they're trying to do something that's not natural to them. Like you kind of just have to like follow your way and do what's natural. I don't know. This is like a weird. I'm not going to get into philosophy, but like something like that. Sometimes people put themselves like in I guess like a lot of people who get burnt out, they put themselves into situations where they get burnt out. And I personally believe that a lot of times it's actually complicit. Like I've seen people when I was at Valve, I saw people working really hard to bring themselves out, and like honestly, I swear to God, like they did it to themselves, right? Like nobody was expecting them to work that much more. Like sometimes I know people work at toxic companies where they're like, oh, we will fire you if you don't work hard enough. But like I think a lot of people do it voluntarily, and then like that creates like the environment of people doing it, and then maybe other people feel like they have to, but like I don't even know why you would stay in like an environment like that, right? Like a lot of these relationships that people have with companies are kind of abusive, right? I don't know. There's a lot to burn out and stuff. Some of it is like, you know, like having good habits and like good like intellectual hygiene and stuff, but like I don't know. It's a very complicated topic. I guess that's why nobody's solved it yet. I don't know.
Well, thank you.
That was a non-answer. Sorry. Some of this stuff is like, these are really big topics, right? And yep.
So speaking of big topics, here's one from chat. How do you think unionization will affect smaller studios?
we talk about this in the office. We go to GDC. So I don't know if you guys all know about this, but there are a fair number of people in the games industry talking about unionization now. I don't even know where I stand on that in general. Like, I think like every other white man in his 20s, I used to be more of a libertarian. Definitely not now. I don't know where I stand on like this stuff in general, and like, you know, a lot of union stuff is like a reaction to stuff in the past and people thinking about the future and how that intersects games. I have no idea. As somebody who is basically indie, I really don't know what that means, right? Like, I honestly don't even know, right? Like, I don't work at a AAA studio where like the working conditions are crappy and people are forced to crunch or feel like they have to crunch. I don't know. I actually don't know anything about that, right? When I worked at Microsoft on Microsoft Game Studios, we were a small team. We didn't crunch. We were shipping like phone games that no one ever played. We were not working that hard, I don't think. And when I worked at Valve, like I actually feel like Valve has like there's like weird politics stuff at Valve, but like I feel like everybody there like was mature enough to have a pretty good work-life balance. I've never worked at like one of the companies you hear about, like one that there might have been a walkout today at or whatever. You know, like I've never worked at anything like that. I don't think I would want to work there. I don't think I would do it at that. You know, like maybe I don't know. I guess what I mean to say is that I really have no experience to like speak to what those people need. Or what they should or shouldn't do. Like I'm a firm believer. One of the things that I've come to believe lately is that it's if you're trying to solve somebody else's problem, you're not going to get it right. The best thing you can do is enable other people to solve their own problems. And with this, it's like if unions are people solving their problems, like power to them. Like that's what we need to do is empower people to solve their own problems. But I'm not going to solve that problem for them because I do not understand it.
Okay, another question from Chad, since he keeps asking, what is the coolest business card you've ever received?
No. My business cards were pretty cool. We made ones for everybody at old Zachtronics that looked like a trading card game, but like I specifically designed like fake rules so that way they would have like a system as opposed to just saying like dumb shit that wouldn't be on a trading card game. Like they were designed to really look like playing cards. I don't think I have it on me, but I feel like they were super cool. But mine had my face on it, so that's cool too. I don't know. I hate business cards. Now, business cards are so stupid. Like, I don't know. I guess that's like a luxury of being somebody who gets handed business cards rather than handing them out. I'm always the guy now who's just like, oh, I don't have any cards. You can find me. Zach and Zachtronics. It's not hard, right? I don't know. In a William Gibson book, there's a story of somebody who, like, he's like an agent, and when he becomes your agent, he will give you his business card once, and it's like a slab of like glass. So it's like you can't put it in your pocket. It just has to sit on your desk or whatever, and you get one of them ever. That's a pretty cool business card. I should get some of those for myself.
So another question. I know that you see yourself as a programmer. Is there any new tech that has you interested in working on?
We are the opposite of that, and that we very, very hard. We work very hard to avoid new technologies because they're untested and unreliable, and they're probably going to be dead like in a month. You know, like Microsoft comes out with new technologies all the time, and like a year later, no one's using them. They've invented something else that's replaced it. So all of our games are built with fairly old versions of C#, and we directly target like DirectX or OpenGL. Those are fairly stable and reliable. We use SDL because that's been around for forever and is reliable. I've switched to writing our websites in PHP because all of the other technologies were like too complicated to deploy, and then you end up getting like roped into like weird like signing up for things and like cloud subscriptions and like dynamic load balancing. It's just like, oh fuck, I just want to run some code on a server. Like that's not my computer. And like so yeah, we've actually there's two programmers at Zachtronics, and I think both of us like on a real philosophical level have become like technological Luddites in the past like 5 years. Like I despise technology now. Like it is imprisoning us and it is going to be the death of us. So yeah, any like honestly every line of code you write is a liability. Right? You want to write as little code as possible. You want to have as few dependencies as possible. If anybody, like, this might be too deep of a programming thing, but do you guys know about, like, the C runtime for, like, the Microsoft C runtime? Like, it's like a dependency. Whenever you install a game on Steam, it's one of the things that it has to install, like, over and over and over and over again. And it's like, we actually even, like, we wrote our own like thing that we shouldn't have to write to get rid of that dependency, because even that wasn't installing consistently, even though this is the thing that like every program made by anybody depends on, right? Like we've turned into real Luddites. We used to use Unity. We don't use Unity anymore. We use our own engine because we know everything that's going on inside of there, and no one's gonna update it on us and like break our shit. So, and I've never been happier as a programmer than with our situation now. Certainly not VR. God, no.
Oh, the next question was, are you interested in VR still?
No, I made a VR game. I'm good. Maybe in like 10 years, I'll be interested in it. Honestly, when it ceases to be a thing and just becomes the new like paradigm, like that's when I'm in.
So we have time for maybe one more question.
Okay, I can go till 7:15 too, like you originally planned. That's fine with me.
Yeah, I had 15 minutes on one side or the other of the class, and so we've got a little bit of business to do here.
Okay.
Hi, how are you? Thank you for coming. I just had a quick question. So you said that you honed your team over the years and everything. So what do you do to retain talent?
Keep them?
Right.
As opposed to getting rid of them?
No, like, they want to move studio, they want to work somewhere else. So, like, how do you keep them happy where you work in a small environment?
We pay acceptably well.
Okay.
But that's like only because of our circumstances. It's the dream, man. Everybody wants to make indie games.
Right.
I don't know. That's a tough. I like you build personal relationships with people, and you show them that they like through actions and through like every day that like they want to be there and not somewhere else. Right? Honestly, it's pretty easy. The games industry is such shit, right? That like it's fairly easy to keep people on board. It's like, oh yeah, you really want to go back to working in AAA? No. And I think we're all, yeah, I don't know. At least like I know for myself that like I don't want to go back to working in the games industry, right? Like.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. There's some subtext here, but yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming out for us a second time here. This was like really informative, and it was really great having you. Can we give like a quick round of applause? All right. Do you have anything to say?
That's it. Yeah.
All right.
Cool. Okay. Thanks. See you guys.